So now we're going to move into the arm. I spent a lot of time thinking about this arm, and I wanted to kind of go over a more complex arm setup, but I just think for the first model, it's going to be a bit of it's too complex, too much connecting and disconnecting, and or weird shapes and weird angles. And since we're kind of working with the T pose, it also causes some issue. So I am going to do a secondary video just on a more complex or proper shoulder shaping. So for now, we're just going to do the old style tube off the top of the shoulder, and it works okay. And if you want to go in and try to rework your shoulder so that it's properly modeled, you can do that. But both methods, for the most part, work okay. I mean, or rather, let's say this other simpler method works pretty well, and we've used it for years, and so anyway, I do want to start adding a new version though. The one thing is that what I want to do is use this row to come up into the arm, and then this row up here will be the top of the shoulder. So I'm going to kind of organize my thoughts about how I want to approach this. And I definitely want to have a row that goes through the arm, and I want to take advantage of the fact that I can kind of add that right now. So I'm going to introduce you to a new tool, and this will allow us to make more complex shapes and cut our character into more pieces. We want to be really careful with this tool, but this is a good time to start using it because I want one right here. So I'm going to go into my mesh tools, and what I'm looking for is this insert edge loop tool. If you take a look at that icon, it might be up on the shelf there. I'm not sure. I don't see it. For some reason, they don't put these in any of the shelf things. It's a good thing too, because you want to be careful with this. You want to keep a coarse model, so we're always trying to resist adding an edge loop in our character because it just makes it more complex, and complexity is something we're trying to manage really carefully. So in this case though, it makes sense to add one. So you can see I just added one. I'll undo that. The tool is again in Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop Tool. And the idea is that you click and drag on edges. So I'm just going to click on one of these edges and drag, and just notice that it conforms itself to one of the other rows. And if you're right dead center, it's sort of the combination of all of them. So it's a pretty cool tool. You can get some nice effect out of it. I'm going to put it about there, just sort of centered. I'll probably have to go back through these edges. I'm not really going to worry again. I'm just, like I said, vertices and stuff. Haven't done anything in there really in terms of modeling. We're really, again, just after that course model. So we want to be careful with this tool because I have it still selected. You see I just added an edge. You want to not have that tool selected. So whenever you have a tool and you can't get out of it, you either Q, which is the arrow tool, or just click on Select Tool, and that'll take you out. So this arrow is really kind of like an escape almost. So remember that when you're doing a tool like that. So now we're back into regular select mode. So now I have the geometry that I want to work with. So I'm going to work right here off the back part of the character. We're going to be using 4 faces. Select faces. Select out my faces. Always good to rotate around and make sure that you're making the selection that you think you are. Now I didn't do anything in terms of bulking that out. I should think about that, but it looks pretty good anyway. Okay. I think it's what I want. So I'm not going to do much modeling on the bottoms either, or rounding out to make it like an arm, because this already is the shape of the torso. What I really want is an extrusion, and then I'll take an extrusion and then I'll round that out. So it's kind of like with the crotch. We had to do one extrusion to set ourselves up to make a shape, and then we made the leg. And it's kind of all of these sort of go through the same process. You usually make an extrusion to help you make a shape, and then you make the object like an arm or a leg or something. So I'm going to make one extrusion, get my move tool. Usually I kind of just pull this thing out a little bit so I can see it. Do a little bit of scale so it's a little bit easier to see as well, just to bump it around, okay? So that when I hit F, remember the key F will help me see from the side view. I'm going to get in the side view here, go to my vertices, and now I'm just going to round this out. I'm just going to grab my each vertex direct selection, just like we did with the leg. I'm just going to kind of top the shoulder. Just want to kind of create roundness. This is kind of the most drastic change right here. Try and get kind of some slight equality to the faces. Equal, not equality, but equal surface area. You know, generally, that's kind of a general rule, just with coarse model, I think helps think of it that way. So that's pretty round. I mean, this is kind of flat right there. You know, you can kind of a little bit. Looks good. Let's go back into face. Just gonna kind of scale it a little bit. Actually, let's scale it this way a little bit. Move it up. Let's take a look at our front view. So you can see it's still a little bit small. It's not too bad actually. It's kind of a bit low. Okay, looks good. A little bit of a rotation just to tip it a little bit this way. And this arm you can actually turn into, you can actually take this arm and actually turn it into the proper shoulder shape. So even these steps are, you can utilize them. I don't know if I use this way on the video or not. I'm still working on different ways of working from here. But anyway, I'm going to do another extrusion now. Now I have that shape, remember? So now I can kind of come out a little bit. We're just going to match these a little bit. So this area is a little bit, I would say, different than, you know, it might end up with slightly more than 6, but we'll see. Let's come up there. I'm going to kind of rotate it back, flat. We'll come back again and add flare to that. I'm going to kind of flatten this out a little bit. So, you know, flattening them out I think helps a lot just in the modeling process, and then coming back and bending things later is helpful. So I'm going to do another extrusion. The move tool, I'm going to come to this narrowest part. I'm just going to get the narrow parts, I'm just going to narrow it down just right from the center of the scale. I'm going to do another extrude. I'm kind of working just from this front view right now. I'm not even going to worry about a top view. I know some people are always like, well, you need a top view. You kind of do for a really good arm, but you know, not really. I mean, it's doable this way too. Usually what's skinny is skinny on all directions, and what's works fairly well. Pretty narrow arm right there. If you'll notice, I've been going up to the extrude tool a lot. Just notice what happens when I press G. G will actually do the last operation that you did. So the last operation you did was an extrude. So if I hit G, it takes time to learn this, but since I'm doing a lot of extrusions, I can just hit G and it'll actually do the extrusion for me. That's G as in good. I don't know. I can't remember how they say that. Anyway, so I'm going to just move this over, get my move tool. So with key commands, I can kind of really just do all the processes that I want to do. So W, self over. G, that does the last operation, which is extrude. Somewhere maybe here. G to extrude. Oops, Z to undo because selections are undoable. Cool. So, you know, you can see there's some areas down in here, like you know, you're going to want to move a vertex or set around in there, but you kind of have this flow of the muscles kind of coming up here. It's not super proper, but you get at least a little bit of of that working and kind of a cap for the muscles on the top here. It's not perfect, but it works for our needs in this class. Okay, so we'll work on the hand now. So actually the wrist is sort of in the wrong position, so I'm going to just widen it out a little bit this way. And probably crush it a little more this way. Probably work on those and widen, do a little bit more widening this way. Some of them seem a little bit narrow. They're thicker that way, so we'll come to that later. So the hand is really best to do from the top view, I find. So we'll just, it's a very long arm. That's actually too far. And that's too narrow, so we'll fix that in a moment. So I'm going to do that from the top view. That's disorientating. Let me just, I don't, it's just, so I wouldn't begrudge you to kind of stop your process for a moment just to fix something, because sometimes your eye just gets bothered by something and you don't want to deal with that. I just didn't like that going in. So now I'll go back in the face. It's not the final edit on that, I just didn't like seeing it. So now this would be the wrist, okay, right there, okay. So the wrist you generally want totally flat, so I'll flatten that right off the bat. I'm going to hit an extrude. I could use the G key. I'm going to come out. Now I'm just going to scale in the Z here. I'm just going to make this wider. So this is really just the start of the palm. I can do another extrude. And this would be the end of the palm. This may not be laid out right. I'll come back and edit these. But that's the end of the palm. So I just did the entire palm right there only. Now I'm going to do 3 more extrusions, and those will be the fingers, because extrusion will be the bend of the fingers. So I'll hit G, and the move tool will come out. It's my first knuckle. G for extrude, move. Second knuckle. And in this case, when we're not talking in terms of divisions, but knuckles, where we're going to bend, things bend on lines. But that's not what we count as a division. It's the space between the division, but things will actually bend on the lines. So, they all are important to think of in different ways. Do one more extrusion, move tool. And this will be the fingertips. So that looks good. Let's just take a look at how we matched with the, yeah, a little short. So let's go into our vertices and just we'll lengthen this out a bit. So around there. So notice I'm just going to kind of crease those one at a time. Come out to the tips there. It's pretty good. It's a pretty long hand. I guess I was trying to make her spindly. That's the idea anyway. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the fingers either. So again, this is called a mitten hand. So the idea is really that you're just kind of making a mitten. So usually the pinky kind of comes in a little bit like this. Something along those lines. Just kind of create a little bit of an arc here. Bring these a little bit forward. Let's come in here. So fingers are pretty thick, so I'm just going to scale them thinner a bit. And then grab these and just kind of make them a little bit thinner like that. Oops. Okay. Basic shape for a hand. Looks pretty good. It's a very long arm. If I don't like it, I can always, just grab the whole thing, scale it, move it in, or whatever. So, I don't usually worry too much about those things as I'm modeling these. Drawing is what I'm following. It's a pretty loose drawing. But, as I model, I start maybe making new decisions. There's a lot of space right here for the thumb, so it might get a bit impacted here. Just gonna go maybe on the bottom real quick and just do a couple edits. I usually like to making selection like this. Just it's a little helpful to turn off your move tool, because sometimes your move tool, like the handle, blocks the vertices. So just hit Q or go to the arrow just for your selection. Sometimes it makes it a little easier to make your selection. Just gonna tip this up a little bit. Just get a little bit of an arc going. Same with we could do that with edge too. See how that new tool sort of get a little bit of an arc here. Actually, I'm just going to take this whole middle ring here. It just feels really kind of a little bit tight. Just move it up a little bit. It's kind of centered. I'm going to deselect. That was a control marquee select that I just did there. The control marquee selects will deselect anything inside of a selection. You should try that real quick and see if you can get it to work. It's a really great way of selecting. It's like deselecting rather than selecting. This edge is also kind of out, right? So I'm just kind of just trying to kind of create a little bit of what you might expect. Okay, looks pretty good. So the thumb actually starts at the wrist, so sometimes people always want to start their thumb right here, come off. I would include these at the wrist too. It helps. That's a big span there to come across. I think what I might do here is just, that's a lot to span. We'll just add one more row in the center there. Remember, we'll use our mesh tools to insert edge loop. Just going to throw one in about maybe, you're going to want it to kind of web out with the fingers there, but I'm just going to throw this one in here about, how about there? This makes that a little bit closer. Okay. Now I'll go into my faces. Take these 4 faces. Do an extrusion. Get that move tool. Gonna come off. Okay. Do a little bit of scale. We'll do kind of a flattening out a little bit. Now we'll go into our vertexes, and we're going to do just a little bit of rounding. And I'm doing this all in perspective, as you can see. It's kind of one of those spots where you're just going to have to start to kind of work in your perspective view for a little while and try and get used to being here. Just notice how I'm really using all of the constraints to move things. I'm not moving things just from the center of the object. It's really important that you notice that I'm not doing that. I'm being very careful about grabbing either 2 dimensions here or something like that, or one-dimensional moves or something like that. It's really easy to get things in places that you didn't expect them to be, and you're like, wait, I didn't know that would be there. You know? It's kind of the palm, so I'll bring that down. That's a bit much. Okay, looks pretty good. So this feels like the whole thing feels a little bit too far out, so I'm going to grab the whole thing. Push it in a little. This thumb is kind of, it's a wiki thumb. I'm going to just come right out and say it, but it works again for the class. Ideally, it would be better if we would rig it, then we'd come straight off, but since we're not going to rig it, we're going to kind of come out. So I'm going to extrude, do some scale on this. You can see it's kind of bending, come a little bit lower this way, and up. Do a little rotation, so notice I'm really using all of the handles. I'm being really careful. Hit G to extrude, I'll do one more move. And that's going to be my thumbnail. That's the tip of my thumbnail. So just come back into our vertices real quick. Grab the front end of this. Oops, got a couple more. Control, marquee select, take those out. It's kind of nice, so anything behind doesn't get selected. It's the opposite of marquee select. Can get things a little bit even. Just trying to line things up as much as, like kind of looking at lines and just trying to make them flow kind of naturally. Again, I might usually would come back and probably end up working a little bit longer on all these parts. Just kind of getting general. Oops. So it's a pretty big hand. We'll kind of stretch this out. Skinnier. Okay, that looks good. So now comes kind of the weird part with because we're not going to rig this in the class. So we're going to take this and we're just gonna kind of crush it in. It's not going to look pretty. I'm going to get my rotate tool and just kind of rotate it down a little bit. I'm going to then get my move tool. So you can see what I'm doing. So I'm just doing a rotation. I'm going to move it down. Okay. I'm going to rotate it again. I'm always using these handles and rotate it this way. Move tool. Move it this way. That's maybe a little bit much this way now. So kind of okay. Now I'm going to just go into my option. Let's grab just the tip here. We'll do a little more rotating here. So we're going to try and, it's going to be a little bit weird to get it. So it's a little bit funny. Just grab these back vertices here and just kind of poke them a little bit this way. Just kind of use that a little. For some of you, I think this will probably be the most difficult shape so far for you to model. You can see in here it's a bit tight, so we'll just kind of try to ease this a little. So wherever you see like edges really getting kind of really super bent like this, you just want to try and find their what's causing that to kind of angle so much, and just try and ease some of that out a little bit. Let's come back a little. So with this one, maybe a little bit. If you were to do this with the with joints, you would get distortion as well, and so we have to kind of think about how that would distort. These are all just kind of judgment calls. Palm feels like it's really now. So just trying to ease that line, so that they kind of flow into one another. Okay. Maybe now we can push this in a little bit. The back side here. So as you can see, is kind of flattened because I rotate around the edge. You can see it kind of flattens out. I'm just going to move it in a little. Cool. It's good. So it's not ideal. It's kind of big. From up here, again, I can always just make a selection of the area and just take out. Sorry, that was out of control. Take out what I want. I can say grab that and get my scale, and from far away it looks kind of too big. So if I can scale this in a little bit, I can play with that to get the right scale that I want. For now, I'm just going to leave it. But it does feel the whole hand feels big, So along those lines feels a little more better. So I'll make those decisions later once I kind of have put a little more thought into it. So there's the hand, then the foot, looking pretty good. So I'm just going to throw a save on there. Save scene as. So this is with the arm. So this is mesh 2. We're on mesh 3. So mesh 3 is going to be with arm and hand. Okay, so again, pretty big step.